common narrative in the homes of single mothers, and that's when we know the father isn't present and at times not involved or consistent in their son's life. The mothers, we experience mommy guilt. Because of the guilt, we tend to overcompensate. What happens when mothers overcompensate?
You have to take that pressure off of yourself. When you're experiencing this guilt, you begin to cater to your son instead of raising him. In those situations, I see young men running over their mothers because their mothers feel guilty for their father not being there. The mothers feel guilty for not having this dream, perfect, lush life. At the end of the day, it's not your fault, and you have to remember that regardless of how the situation played out, you are built and you are strong enough to handle it and manage it. You have to be firm in disciplining them and not let that guilt prevent you from adequately disciplining and adequately raising your sons.
How should single mothers of sons handle their child's frustration concerning the absent father? And also, what if their son doesn't want to communicate with their father?
The frustration will be there. It'll come. I experienced frustration. I grew up with a single mother. My mother raised me, and I didn't necessarily blame my mother, but the frustration was there because I felt like I should have had a father, and I was upset at everyone. I had anger issues. I was lashing out, and these are some of the symptoms that you see in these young men. They're angry. They're lashing out. They have a chip on their shoulders. Get them with outlets, positive outlets. So to whether it's putting your son in karate, kickboxing, boxing, soccer, give them an outlet to transfer this energy into. I mean, even something as simple as chess, just to get that energy out there. And it's important to communicate with your children, right? A lot of parents don't think that they can't talk to their children, have a conversation. These children are a lot smarter than we believe. So talk to them about their feelings, talk to them about their frustrations, especially young men. Young men don't, right? Men don't have the range of emotions and feelings that women have. So it's hard to tell them, it's hard for them to adequately explain what emotions they're feeling. But it's important to have those conversations with them. How are you feeling right now? Are you frustrated? Are you angry? Are you mad? Why are you angry? Why are you mad? Okay, how does this make you feel? It's important to find out about your young child's feelings, your man's feelings, because if that's not dealt with, you deal with adult males that are emotionally unstable.
Yes.
Adult males that don't know how to explain how they're feeling. They don't know how to say, hey, I'm frustrated. Hey, it bothers me when you do this. Hey, I'd rather you not. So they begin to bottle everything up, and then they become explosive, verbally, emotionally abusive. So it's important for you as a mother of a single male, right, to instill these values and that you want them to see. Instill having them explain their emotions and talk about how you feel. There's nothing wrong with talking about how you feel.
Let's just say that the son, lashes out on us in anger because the father's not there. And sometimes some children actually come out and blame us.
These young children are very manipulative, right? They're manipulative from birth. If your son senses that you're having mommy guilt and you're insecure about that area, he will poke his finger in there he will poke at those areas. So it's important to nip this in the butt at the youngest age possible. If you don't want your child to treat you as his punching bag, it has to never be acceptable. Just like if you don't want your dog on the couch, it has to never be accepted. And I don't want to say utilize fear, because fear worked very well for my mother. I brought you in this world, I can take you out, right? So it's important to let them know, like, I am your parent. I'm not your friend, right? A lot of mothers want to be the friends of their sons. You have to be a parent first, right? Your first obligation and job is, I am your parent. Right, you are not going to talk to me like that. You're not going to treat me like that. And if it's not dealt with at a younger age, it begins, as they get older, it gets more and more out of hand.
You're right.
And before you know it, it's like, I don't know what to do. Another thing that I would add is, don't be afraid to ask for help. I see a lot of women that want to deal with this by themselves. I'm strong. You can still be strong and ask for help.
Amen.
Some of the strongest people I know ask for help because it's important to get help. Right, because if you can't manage this at a young age, right, if your son can't submit to the authority in your household, chances are they don't submit to authority at school, and then they'll submit to authority when it comes to police and outside influences, and this becomes a serious problem. And it has to start with you. They have to be able to submit to your authority first and foremost.
Some of us, we're tired, and it's like we play the bad cop, good cop, and oftentimes in the household, the mother is more the nurturer, the father is more the disciplinarian. So what happens is, as a single mother, when you have to play both roles, sometimes it becomes taxing, and sometimes you don't carry out, and I think we're going to hit on this later, and we don't carry out, we're not consistent with our disciplines, and we'll touch on that later. But what if their son doesn't want to communicate with their father? How does a single mother encourage that because the child is angry, feels abandoned, he feels
Yes.
neglected.
Your child has to form his opinion of his father for himself. The opinion can't be influenced by you. So I strongly urge women to, regardless of the situation with his father, not to badmouth his father in front of the child. If possible, don't do it at all, right? Because you don't want to sow those negative seeds. You don't want your son to have an imprinted image of his father based off of the things that you said. Whether or not they're true, he has to identify these things on his own, right? There's some things that that your son is going to lead to because of his father, and vice versa. I know with me, my mother told me my father was a provider, so when it comes to me, that's the area that I charge towards the providing, right? It's important to speak life in his areas. So you figure out why. Why don't you want to communicate with him? Because you feel whatever the feeling is, it's important to remember that you must honor your father.
Yes.
You honor your mother and father, right?
Yes.
That's the way that God designed it, right? To honor your mother and father so you may have a long life.
Yes.
As he get older and there may be issues and he may choose to not deal with his father, right? That's an issue in the area of forgiveness, right? Once he understands that you have to forgive him for what he does. Now, forgiving people doesn't mean to continue to allow them to hurt you.
Oh.
So if his
Say
if
that
his
again.
if his if his if his method of protecting himself from getting hurt and disappointed is to distance himself, that has to be his choice and not your choice, right?
Right.
You shouldn't choose to keep your son away from his father.
Right.
At the end of the day, your son has to make decisions on his own, and if his decision is to, I'd rather distance myself from him because I'm tired of the letdown, the disappointment, then that's acceptable, right? I wouldn't force the issue. This is not a blanket rule, right? So there are different circumstances, right? If you're worried about the protection and safety of your son,
Yes.
or if the father has a history, or right, there's some family members that, it would be wise to keep your children from interacting with, right? In our community, I was on a panel, and molestation is something that's not talked about
yes.
often. So there is still wisdom in it, as far as who you keep your son away from.
That's
But
true.
I don't think that you should keep your son away from his father because
Out of spite.
Out of spite.
Exactly.
Christina?
Yes, and Christina says, it was rough raising a son. I had men from church as well as my father and male family members step up, but he was still angry. He became a dad 4 days shy of his 17th birthday, and now a father to 3 boys at the age of 24. I believe he's doing everything to be twice the man his dad was. What's it?
That's very important that she said it's important. She reached out to help, so she had men from the church, and she had his grandfather. So it's important to surround your children with men. I know me being around my grandfather and my uncles definitely helped me shape who I was, because what I had taken on, I didn't know until I later realized that I had taken on the attitude and demeanor of my mother.
Which was?
I was spawned emotional to different situations, right? And being around my grandfather, I learned that everything doesn't have to make me angry. Everything doesn't have to make me. Every question doesn't need an answer, right? Every offense. So I learned how to be more temperate, and I see men that are hot-headed and short-tempered, and you be like, okay, you're acting in an emotional state, right? Well, where did you get this emotional state of behavior and reaction from? And sometimes it comes from their mother. They're seeing how their mother reacts to different situations. They're seeing how different women react to different situations. So it's very important to have an environment where you surround your son with positive males.
That's good.
Right, and that goes for your dating as well, right?
That's
so
true.
The first thing is you have to edify yourself. You have to love yourself enough so that you're not seeking the attention from just any man, because your son is going to pick that up.
That's right.
Right, when you're bringing just any man around, or just a body because you're feeling lonely, right? You have to love yourself first, and in the midst of you loving yourself, right, being a single mom is a full-time job.
Yes.
Right, it's a full-time job. Your son has to have priority. Your son has to be treated and surrounded with positive men. Like, you shouldn't date anyone that you don't want your son to become.